Hey, everybody. How are you? How are you? I hope everyone is having a good start of the week. For us special needs moms, everything is super interesting. So I want it to be weekends all the time. So we're here, and I have a very, very special guest who has a lot of fire, who has a lot to offer to the space of advocacy and activism. Because we're gonna try to define the two, right? Because there is a major difference, and in understanding why parents have to be informed, making sure that you are engaged in the conversation when it comes to the special education, to the health of your child, for your child and your children, for your family. And so, this conversation is critical. And without further ado, I want to introduce Christina Laster, the policy director for the National Parents Union. And also, she does tons of work, which she'll get into, in California. So she's from the Cali, y'all. Cali's in the building. So, I'm going to bring her on and we're going to chop it up. What's up, Chica?
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing good. So tell us, who are you? Who are you?
So my name is Christina Laster. I am the Director of Policy and Legislation for the National Parents Union. Shout out to NPU. And yes, I am a California native, born and raised in San Diego. And so I'm still here fighting the good fight, and helping other parents to do the same. Thank you for having me.
So let's get right into it, because you know me, right?
Right.
Let's talk about it. And I know that before we went live, we were talking about what's the difference between advocate and being an activist. And so you have to define the two, because sometimes I'm like, I'm an advocate, sometimes I'm an activist, and I'm like, listen, I just like to start trouble. That's what I like to do.
And really, you can be both. And when we're talking about our children, we are their biggest advocates, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we definitely understand what that looks like. Just being there to be their public, private support. They are our cause. Their education is our cause. And we're committed to making sure that they have everything that they need to thrive, right? Not just barely survive K through 12 education. So that is part of who we are innately, as parents, is our children's and our grandchildren's. And if you're a caretaker, foster parent, you're advocating for the children that are in your care. You are their biggest supporter, and you are going to continue to pursue what is best for them. So that's basically looking at an advocate as a person who publicly supports or recommends a particular cause or policy, right? When we talk about activism, we talk about, having that policy or action, but campaigning around that thing to bring about political or social change, right? And so we could be advocates, but not particularly activists. And sometimes, people do get involved in activism when you see a social justice issue or a political issue. We've experienced a little taste of activism. Some of us for the first time, some people like me, like this is just what I do. Within this last year, so people can relate to being rallied and campaigning to bring about a political or social change, right? And that could be even something as writing newsletters, articles, whatever, petitioning to elected officials. A lot of it is what activism looks like. And so that would be the major difference between the two.
I love that, because I feel like I wear both of the hats. When it comes to like my personal life, I'm definitely an advocate, and when it comes to certain things, I'm definitely been able to mobilize and try to ruffle some feathers for legislative change and policy change here in Mass. So talk to me, or talk to us, about why it's so important for parents to be informed, and why having access to the information and being knowledgeable on a particular topic, whether specifically on special education or health related or housing related, why is it so important for people to really be informed on that topic?
So when we look at the ways that we are able to effectively fight on behalf of our children and other children, and just basically what's right, what we call education justice, right? You know, you really want to come from a place of understanding and a place of knowledge, and not just always get caught in emotional battles, right? If you could just really think about, anger can only get you so far, right? You can yell and scream and fight all day, and that has its place. I'm not going to say that it doesn't have its value, but the person that has the knowledge, that has the logic, that has the data, the research, the reason, the reasonable argument is going to get a little bit further than just the mad mom. How many of us have been mad moms, ready to just like really like light some torches, right, and burn this thing down, right? But how far is that gonna really get us into the policy and decision making spaces that we need to be in? And so when you look at it that way, you have to really understand what it is that you're fighting and what it is that you're fighting for. Understanding the system and the structure of the system, right? I did the boot camp. We can talk about that in a second. That helped to really talk about government structures in the US. And beyond just the government structure, what is the separation of their powers? What is the checks and balances on that power, so that you can know who it is that you need to be targeting information to, who it is that you need to be directing your complaints and your suggestions to, right? And so coming from an informed place helps you not just be reactive, but be proactive, right? So you move from that emotional response type of environment to a more proactive and strategic approach. So you have to know what it is and who it is on all levels.
Yep, the who, what, where, all of that. And that's important, right? Because as you know, for us who do a lot of advocacy and activism work for special education, we find that when we meet parents and we're meeting parents where they are, oftentimes parents do not know who the special education director for their child's school district is. They don't know who to send certain emails to. And they're stuck. They oftentimes don't even know how to draft up an email that is very specific and tailored, that you can get an answer, versus kind of like what you're saying is that sending an email that's full of a lot of raw emotions, a lot of frustration. What you're going to get back is that that talking in circles response, right? And you're never going to get to an answer, because they oftentimes know that you as a parent may not have the proper information to get the answer. And the reality is that we know that oftentimes many school districts are not going to pause and say, hey, well, let me look up, at least here in Massachusetts, let me look up, the Massachusetts Department of Ed, frameworks, and look at all these policies and procedures to answer your question, because it might not benefit them, right? So it's always good to say, before I send this email, let me read my child's IEP, let me thoroughly understand, and if I'm not clear about what's on there, let me also reference to the special education law so that I can cite section, 2.5B says X, Y, and Z, so that you can answer to me why we have either discrepancy, or can you clarify to me what this means in relation to my child's IEP and the services that they're supposed to have. I appreciate that, because being informed is critical in this space. So let's talk about.
And you know what? I want to say something about that, right? If we could just step back. So think about when you don't have that flow chart, right, of who you're supposed to be talking to, of the person that is the administrator or decision maker over the process, and you go through a whole bunch of people and they tell you, I'm not the person that does this. And you're thinking, well, who is? Because I done went through 5 people already. And so having that flow chart, that structure, understanding the way that things flow and operate, right, will even remove some frustrations. So you don't feel like you're repeating yourself 10 times. And by the time that you get to the person that's actually the decision maker, you're so pissed because you repeated it 5 times that now you're just like dumping, right? You're just like, I'm going to dump all of this frustration because it took me all of this just to locate you. Now, if you had understood that structure, that flow chart, the way that things happen and took place, who's in control of what ahead of time, you could target that person with exactness, right? You don't have to be like going through what you may feel is a hamster on a wheel, just over and over again. And this is for any area of life, because even when we look at like how we try to do things at the doctors, right? You don't want to go through 10 people and explain your medical condition 5 times, right? To get to the right person. You want to be able to pick up the phone and get to the exact person that can help you with your situation, and come from a place of just, it can get emotional, but we're talking about facts here. This is the law. This is what you're required to do. And I need to see how you're doing it. And I need you to put that in writing, especially when we're talking about IEPs.
So leading to why being informed is also instrumental as you begin to start to get engaged, right? When you're engaged in school meetings, you start attending school committee meetings because you're trying to address the elected officials. You're reaching out to state and local leaders, public figures. What can you tell us as a parent who does a lot of work in California around this? Why being informed leads you into a space where you can get into a room full of, it's politicians, other community activists, other, advocates, and you guys can have a conversation that could lead into what we all know as strategizing, right? So talk to us about that.
So let me talk from the very foundation, right? As a parent, you are automatically, like I said in the beginning, going to be advocating for what your child needs. Okay. Having said that, if you decide that you have done that effectively and you want to help other people, then it's definitely important at that point to set a goal, right? Setting a goal around your advocacy or activism. What is it that you want to see happen? And make that a reasonable goal. Put the time frame guideline, like say, for instance, you're fighting for adequate curriculum around dyslexia, right? Which a lot of people are fighting. If that's going to be your fight, you set that as a goal and you do not move away from that goal. You remain consistent and unrelenting in whatever goal you set. Now, in setting the goal, you're going to want to develop some tactics and strategies around that goal. Like, how are you going to be able to, get the goal? What are you going to do? What are the strategies that are you going to use? Are you going to attend every board meeting once a month and demand that something be done on public record? Are you going to do some more campaign type of things like sending letters to elected officials? Those are all strategies that can help you reach your ultimate goal, right? And then you really want to keep a self-assessment type of measurement, milestone moments of what you where you started and what you bring in now, what you've been able to accomplish, because that'll help you along the way when you're setting an immediate, intermediate, and long-term goal, right? And part of that strategy can be and it's going to have to be, because although we don't like to look at public education as political, it is. Right.
So we need to emphasize this, because as you know, as advocates and activists, we get this all the time. Parents don't understand how political education is. At the foundation of it is all political, and it's a fight. You're gonna fight for everything, especially for those here, because this platform is special education, specifically autism, right? So it's everything is about the fight and understanding politics and being as informed as possible.
Right. And, I like to give the example of you looking at social service systems. That's another branch of government. Public education is another branch of government, right? And once you see it that way and you understand the way that the system flows, you understand the way that the flow chart looks, like who does what, where, and how, that can help you then enter into those discussions with decision makers. And so the reason why I was saying to set a goal and develop some strategies around that goal, and then look at what you're going to produce on that goal along the way, is very essential, because it helps to ground you. Okay. This is important. This is a very important thing. I've been in spaces fighting for education, and people say, well, what about housing? Right? Or what about transportation? Right? Or what do you think about small businesses? And where I have, some thoughts on those things, that's not my area, and that's not what I'm seeking to accomplish. That's not my goal, and that's somebody else's department. I'll let the other advocates and activists go ahead and do their thing in that. But I am centered and laser focused in this. It helps you remain consistent, unrelenting in what you're planning to target and to reach, right? Because what typically happens is that we can get involved in all of these other things, and you start feeling like an octopus, stretched way too thin. We're not octopuses, right? And then you find that your energy, your time, your efforts were spent, and you feel scattered, confused, chaotic. Like, what is really the big picture here? And so you want to reground yourself around your lane and what it is that you're seeking, and pursue that. Don't go into that other lane. Don't go into that other lane. Okay. This is your lane. You stay there and you pursue it with precision, having the appropriate information, the data, the research, the knowledge about what you're talking about makes you the credible authority in that area. And so that's some advice that I want to give.
And it's true. And I'm happy you said that, because, as parents, there's like there's multi-layered issue, right? About, for those that have children with unique challenges that are, learn differently, otherwise known as having a disability. We also know that not only is their education is important, some of our babies may have medical issues that attention. So not only are we fighting the fight of education, now we're adding the element of equitable access to healthcare. And then, we're going to add the element of parents who may not, especially now, right, in this pandemic, that in addition to, your children during a pandemic, because we know this is a huge crisis, and there's we've all had this conversation repeatedly, that many of our kids in special education have not all been getting the services and the supports that they require, to have access to a free, appropriate public education. We also know that some of us health wise are not, our kids have health deficits, so they might not be able to be in a building, and we want them in. So we have all those issues. And then now we're going to add housing. So it's very important, as Christina said, that as parents, we got to figure out that one fight that we know that we can fight, and we give it that much attention, right? Because it is exhausting, especially special education. It's, again, so political. Everything's based on policies, procedures, and constantly holding people to task. And that itself is draining. It is so draining. And I find that as a parent, I've done that. And I do that in my personal space, where, I'll get a phone call from a parent who's like, hey, girl, I'm going through this. And I'm like, okay, girl, let me look up some information. Let me find it to you. next thing you know, you get wheeled into a different conversation or a different form of, work, and then you're like, whoa.
Right. So you definitely
Realize I didn't eat today. You know what I mean? Like,
right. So you definitely want to remain consistent and unrelenting in the goal that you're pursuing, and make sure that, you let people know, I have the capacity to do this right here. I'm not going to do everything else. So it's going to require some hard stops and some no's, right? For us as parents, we are caretakers of our children and our families. And so it can become very challenging when you feel emotionally spent, physically taxed, right? And then trying to like ground yourself, and then you look around and you're like, wow, what was that, right? You don't want to do that, because you have to continue to care for your children, and you do have to continue to care for your families. And part of caring for your children and families is saying what you have the capacity and ability to do and what you are not going to do, right? Everybody has a role and a function in this. And to speak of that, you also want to make sure that when you develop your goal, your strategy, and what you're going to produce, you see who is willing to also engage in the fight with you. You can get one person that you buddy up with and say, this is what we're pursuing, because two are better than one. I'll tell you that. It doesn't require that, but it's better, right?
Yeah.
And you guys can share in that collective responsibility. It's very important that when you are, engaging around special education, that you understand the federal and state laws, right? What is IDEA? If you don't know, you need to know. What does the federal section 504 code say, right? You need to know that. And what is the Americans with Disabilities Act, right? What is that, right? You need to take the time to research that so you can understand your rights, and make sure that you are being treated with respect. Okay. Treated with respect. Demand that. Matter of fact, you set the tone. You set the tone of demanding that respect, right? Don't let people talk down to you. Don't let people mistreat you. And don't let people push you to make decisions without all of the information. And a lot of parents get emotional in these IEP and 504 meetings. And they just go ahead and sign. You don't have to do that. You don't do that. Okay. Make sure.
And they prey on that, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to be emotionally off. You're not going to be task orientated. You're not there. You lose the vision and the mission as to why you're there. Because like you said, these are all part of the strategies, right? And so when they see you in that space, you lose them. And I've learned this because as a parent, I decided myself recently have been wanting to get involved more on the political landscape of the conversation, because I'm like, okay, listen, I am talking to a lot of school committee members. I am showing up to these meetings, but there's times that I don't even really understand, I don't even understand the formula. I'm sitting here like, who's this, who's that, what they do. You got school committee members that are assigned, to a school, to a school, so if a school committee member is assigned to a specific school, what is it? Why are you assigned to that specific school? What are you supposed to do as a school committee member as far as being assigned to that school? Are you going to have meetings with this, with this specific school? Are you having meetings with administrators? Are these meetings open to parents and the public? How often are you meeting? So again, these are all things to think about, and as far as strategy. And I love the fact that you said who's better than one, because we also know in communities of color, right? There isn't a lot of, I'm not going to say there isn't, our civic engagement is a little bit different compared to our counterparts, right? And so, we often, and it's for multiple reasons. And if you can find one parent to go with you to these meetings, whether you guys tag team these meetings. 1 month you go, next month the other parent goes, or 1 week you attend the meeting, or the next week the other parent attends the meeting. You guys all stick to a script. You stick to the same questions that you're trying to get answered to, answers to, and continue that approach, because therefore they'll see the consistency. And they're going to be like, oh, these parents ain't going nowhere. And then the next thing you know it, other parents see you being consistent. They hear about you. And then next thing you know, that 2 turns into 3. Then that 3 turns into 4. And next thing you know, it could be 10 of you guys at a school committee meeting and saying, see, listen, you guys told us that basically we were the only 2 that had that problem. Now we got 10 other more people. There's 10 of us that got the same problem. So what's up?
Right. And so, that could be the strategies that you use to pursue your goal, right? And that creating that network and that community type of collective action. And so you really, really, really seriously want to be able to say what you're able to do, find the strengths in other parents, see what they're able to do, remain unrelenting and consistent. If we had our communities, because I heard you say that our communities really are like not developed around legislation and policy, and that is a fact, right? Considering our counterparts are really developed around legislation and policy from their childhood, because they might have elected officials or representatives in their family, and so they have access to this. And looking at the ways that our communities may see the law and structure, system, government as intimidating or just apprehensive to deal with them. And so how do you remove that apprehension? How do you remove that intimidation factor, right? It comes from understanding and having knowledge, being able to understand the law and policy in such a way that you can then break it down to someone else. And that, I'm going to tell you, it doesn't happen overnight. That takes practice. Like, you're not going to just go in and let me, understand this law code or policy and be able to just fully, be developed in one day. This takes actual practice and use of it, right? Think about when you enter into the IEP meeting. I'm going to touch on this. How many people are there compared to you, right?
I call those the mob sit downs, because you just feel like either we're going to have a good conversation or it's going to be a bad conversation.
Exactly. And you as a parent are automatically going to be provoked emotionally, because you might feel like you're being attacked. You know your child best. Maybe some people aren't listening to what you're saying. People are throwing big words out that you probably haven't heard. They're creating all of these decisions, and you're kind of like just there and feeling like maybe you're in another body, but you're not, and so that can create an environment where you lose, right? But if you went into the meeting and you were fully informed and you asked every single person at the meeting, what is their role in the meeting and what is their function and role with your student and why do they need to be there, right? Mm-hmm. You set the tone then that you are paying attention. And I've done this, and the last time I did it, the teachers brought their union reps with them because I don't know. And so I was like,
you know too much.
And so, and that was a space where I had to kick everybody out and say, this is my child's meeting and I didn't give you permission to be here. So you can bounce, you can go. And I need to know what you're here for, right? And what
and I want you to hit on that, because I think that it's okay for parents to do that.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because I think we feel obligated, right? Because we kind of feel like we're bombarded, and we just have to be in that space and own it. When if it's, especially if you haven't even received, the information that you need 2 days prior to your child's IEP, whether it's the progress reports, any recent evals, or anything of that nature. If you haven't even received those documents 2 days prior to your child's IEP, that IEP shouldn't even be happening.
No, you can cancel it and demand a better timetable. So what you need to do is make sure that you, and even though this is done online or on phone, okay, first thing I want to say is that if you have an IEP or 504 annual, triannual, addendum meeting coming up, you make sure you go in with a partner. Okay, that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is that you demand all of the information and reports in advance. Don't let them hand them to you 24 hours in advance and think that you're going to be fully informed about what is being said. And that's not the best utilization of your time for the IEP meeting, right? And so you want to make sure that you have that information in enough time for you to be able to dissect it. Maybe ask some people that you know have maybe a little bit more knowledge in this area, if what they feel about it, right? And so that's the second thing. Don't go alone, and then make sure that you have what you need to make informed decisions while you're in the meeting. Okay. The third thing is when you get, whether it's a phone conference or a Zoom, you set the tone for the meeting by making sure that everyone who's there is supposed to be there. If they're not supposed to be there, ask them to leave. They have no role. Let them know that this information is confidential with regards to your child's diagnosis or disability, and you did not grant them access to that private information. Okay.
And it's protected by HIPAA. Absolutely.
Right. And so they don't have a role or a function. They don't need to be there. Okay. The next step is going to be establishing the tone by the time. You need to say to everyone there, if you are in this meeting and you're supposed to be in this meeting, I need to know, are you going to be departing early? And if I have your full attention for the duration of this meeting, because if all of you are not committed to the time established for this meeting, and with your full attention, then I need to reschedule at a time when you can pay attention and be present. Okay. So that's how you do that. And don't feel intimidated by people saying, well, we could only get everybody together at this time. Well, you're going to have to figure out another time to get everybody together. Right. And that's your scheduling dilemma, not mine. Let me know, right? Here are the dates and times where I'm available to be able to discuss my child's needs and the goals and how you're going to meet them. And so that's how you really want to take back your authority as a parent and not be intimidated and bullied out of your rights.
That's right. And so, I mean, we covered a lot. You know what? And let me tell y'all, Christina is the real deal, guys. And she's definitely one of those people that I always text when I need clarity. And what I appreciate about Christina is that she's able to break it down to you and meeting you where you are. Because as she said, you know, a lot of this jargon, it's just a lot of jargons being thrown at us as parents.
Right.
And it's hard to take in so much of that and try to decode all of that on your own. And so it's kind of like one of my teachers currently, you know, for my policy administration courses, she says, don't suffer in silence. Don't do that, because you are going to be so overwhelmed just trying to understand a language, especially when you read your child's IEP, you know. And so to end this, right, what can you say is so important about the role of a parent and understanding their power and owning the spaces that they go into when they go to the IEP meetings, where they're having meetings with legislators? You know, tell us why that role is so important for us as a parent and the power that we bring when we in those spaces.
So I like to use an example of the Rico Act, right? And so the Rico Act was created as a law. It was there, but it sat for like, I think 7 or 10 years before the government even understood how to exact use of it, okay? They didn't even know how to use the law that they created in such a way that it would work. So please do not assume that just because there's this legislation or this policy or this code, the law, right, that people that are in charge of decision making processes know how to exact use of it in your situation. Okay. And so you have to understand your rights and challenge what you know is a violation of your rights. Sometimes people say the board comes up with policies and they have unintended consequences. Well, in some cases, I think they're intended, but then at other times, it's because they create laws that seem okay, but haven't really understood how to exact use of it. That's where your parent power comes in. You as parents are creating the narrative around how they are going to treat you according to your rights, according to what is established. And you set, even if it hasn't been done before, you set the precedent. You say, no, this is what the law says. And this is how it should be exacted in this situation, right? That's very important. You can't assume that these people know, because they don't always know.
Let me tell you something. They don't, half of them don't know. Right. And I've been in complete shock that I've spoken to some politicians that have no clue about special education. And these are federal laws. They don't know.
Right. And they're not gonna
representing me.
Right. It's like having a tool that you don't know how to use, right? And so you need to learn how to utilize that tool in order to be effective with using it. And that takes practice. Again, talking about practice till you master it. And so access to the law can be very tricky, because you have these big words, you have these phrases, you have, this section, then attached this article, and then attached to this act. And so it can be
the C, the D, the E.
Right. So it can be a challenge. And I'd like to say the first place you start is with what is the overarching law idea, right? You start with that. And then I would say, look at your state's legislation, school code, or what some states call education code, right? What did the legislature say parents' rights are supposed to look like? Does it say that parents shall be a partner in their child's education? Okay, fine. Who gets to dictate what that partnership looks like? You need to be there dictating what that partnership looks like. Don't let anyone dictate that for you, because this is what partnership looks like. If you let the decision makers dictate it, they're going to dictate it in their favor. Okay. Parents have to be able to say, this is what authentic partnership looks like. This is what real collaboration looks like. This is what respected, working together looks like. And I'm not going to allow you to dictate your preferred method of partnership, your preferred method of collaboration. I'm going to tell you what it looks like. And so that's why it's very important to understand your rights and to act on them. And to continue to do that, because it's not something where it's a one and done. Sometimes you do have to move your advocacy into activism and start a campaign around an issue. And that is where that community develop partnerships, networking is going to matter, right? We see that happening all the time. When things are not going according to the law, or your rights are being violated, then you have to step into that other realm. But you're not going to know unless you start somewhere. And so I don't think every parent is going to, start a campaign tomorrow. Some might, around literacy, around dyslexia, around, whatever your pursuit is. But make sure you have an established goal, strategies to reach that goal, and what you are able and capable of producing on.
Boom. I heard that, right? So, Christina, tell us, tell us before, you tell us any upcoming events that are happening, or workshops or webinars or forums that you're hosting, because we know we can find you on NPU Live. You have your own show. Tell us if there's a current policy or framework that you're trying to put together, and tell us where to find you, and especially on NPU, and when your show is and what your show is all about.
Sure, no problem. And I know I gave a lot of information in this short amount of time. You can see my information streaming at the bottom of this video. But if you go on the National Parents Union Facebook page and you look in the video section, you will see a 3-week boot camp that we just completed. So we did a winter advocacy boot camp, developing change makers. Definitely go look at all of those 3 weeks. The first week we did talk about U.S. Structure of government, checks and balances, separation of powers. You'll learn a lot by watching that. The second week we talked about the art of persuasion, the use of persuasive speech, right? Why understanding, having logic, being able to be that credible source of accurate information, and also an emotional appeal is all necessary in a balance, right? So we talked about that. The third week, we did putting it all into action, where we gave the toolkit. You can look up on the nationalparentsunion.org. Our toolkit showed you how to use it, showed you the information from the polling. We polled parents across the nation about education. Definitely look at that information. You can use that in your conversations with elected representatives, school officials and administrators, so that you have consensus around what it is that you're saying, and you're coming from a place of logic and having that logic. And so on Tuesdays, I do a policy and legislation breakdown live show that will be at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time, where I take things like, currently I'm working on the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, also known as the Every Student Succeeds Act, where I'm breaking it down into chunks, right? What does Title I mean in this case? What does it mean to have the Elementary and Secondary Education Act? And how come no one ever told me about it, right? How does that dictate the education landscape across the nation? So breaking that down. On Thursdays, I do managing day to day, same time, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 2 p.m. Eastern, where we just talk about real lived experiences and how you can thrive moment by moment, day by day. And so definitely check that out. You can reach me, Christina, at npunion.org, or you can go on our Facebook page and see the videos, and you can reach out to me through Facebook.
All right. So you heard it here. Like this, she's dope.com. I love her. I love her realness. We instantly connected because I think that, as he said, as parents, we develop these strategies. And sometimes these strategies don't even have to be in the form of advocacy and activism. It could be about social emotional support, right? And having that one person that you can pick up this phone and say, hey, girl, like today, the principal is going to get it. He or she's going to hear from me. And then having someone who can say, hey, you should ask these questions and, think about this and think about that. And so, Christina, thank you, boo.
I love you. I got your
back. And we're going to always have you back here and build that partnership with you. And I'll continue to share your show and the winter boot camp. These are all shows that you can revisit. They're available in a public space. And so with that saying, good night, mi gente.
Bye.